Okay, I think I am up and running now. So I apologize for the technical issues. I've been having lots of technical stuff going wrong. If you can see behind me, my computer is open. You can see all the guts. So that is, I was trying to swap out a hard drive and something went horribly wrong. So I'm going to be dealing with that this week and probably working on my soldering skills, which are none right now, which means that I'm going to be learning a new skill this week, which I guess is a good thing. So, um, in the meantime, I figured I'd try to get on here and answer a few questions, and it may be kind of a shortened symposium here, but let's go ahead and give it a shot. I was hoping to go over a little bit of the score that I recorded earlier in the week. If you joined me for that, that was kind of a fun experience. But it's just going to be a little too difficult to try to cover anything like that for this one, just because it's all on that computer behind me. So, other good news though, I was able to move the baby grand into my studio with a little bit of elbow grease and cushion, and so now I'm excited to be able to play this. I find that it's much more inspiring to be playing on a real piano than it is to be playing on a digital piano. So that's just me, but it's good. I when I bent the little cable thing. I mean, I guess I don't have to go into details what happened with the computer swapping out the hard drive this morning, but when it did happen, I kind of had a freak out moment for a little bit because I know the part's going to take at least a week probably to get here, and once it does, it's going to be risky putting it in. However, I also realized that it's a good chance for me to focus on my non-computer composing skills. So getting into more just using paper and pencil and kind of getting back to the basics. Maybe it's a sign that I need to step away from Sibelius and really just work on this kind of stuff. So yeah, let's go ahead and see. I'm still having what looks like maybe some technical stream issues. So once again, I apologize for that. I was kind of blindsided by this. If you are watching, feel free to jump on the live chat and post some questions, and I'll try to get to them. And yeah, so as I said earlier this week, I was able to do a recording, and if you go on to the YouTube channel, you'll be able to find that there, the live recording session of the string quartet out in Armenia. And it was a great experience. The sound quality on the stream isn't all that great because it was all happening in it was on the left channel for me only. It wasn't in the right channel. And that was just because they're not set up yet with Source Connect. So we were trying to connect through some basic free stuff. And it kind of worked. It was so-so. You have to be willing to put up with a little bit of not great sounding capabilities if you're going to be going for free. But Source Connect is quite expensive, and right now in Armenia they're not doing enough recorded, remote recording of string quartet, or really anything remote recording, to justify them purchasing the full Source Connect. So if anybody's curious about that. But what I'm working on right now is creating videos of the scores with the recorded string quartets so that you can actually listen clearly, because the recording turned out really great. And it's one of the reasons why I really love writing for small ensembles like that. Even if I'm doing a film score, I can avoid using sample libraries and really just make it about a great performance and great music, and not have to write to the samples specifically. So I wrote things that sounded so when I mocked them up, but when you get them with real players, they just sound really amazing. In particular, one of the techniques that I use and I like to use frequently is fingered tremolo, where the violin would be kind of doing almost like a little trill kind of thing. and it just sounds so terrible in Sibelius. I mean, it's almost embarrassing, and you don't want to have your director do it, but or you don't want to have your director listen to that if you can avoid it. But once it gets in the hands of the real players, it's such a cool sound and cool effect. So that's probably what we'll be going over next week when I hopefully have the computer back together. And it was all supposed to be an innocent swapping of a hard drive, and oh well, that's what happens. So, okay, well, yeah, I'm not seeing any questions in the chat right now. I don't know if there's an issue connecting to it, but let's see. Yeah, so no questions. So, yeah, this week I really am going to be focusing on just doing more composing by hand and just getting into, I don't know, what it is to be a composer and have more of a connection to the physical side of the music as opposed to just going straight to your computer and trying to work out something in Sibelius or trying to work out something in Digital Performer, which is my chosen DAW. But it really got me thinking this morning, should losing a computer, should losing your software, your sample libraries, should it cause an emotional reaction? I mean, right now, I've effectively finished my projects up. I did the mixing yesterday and a little bit, I think, the day before that. And I got all my stuff submitted to the director. So I'm not on a deadline right now with anything musical, any mock-ups or scores or anything like that. I have another project that's coming up, but we're kind of on hold till we can hear some things back from the decision makers. So not a big deal. But I think there's too much of a reliance sometimes on computers and reliance on the feedback that you get from it. And in a sense, I think it's probably good to force yourself sometimes to get away from that and ask yourself, do you have this capability to actually sit at a piano or even without a piano, just take your sheet music and actually compose something that works and works well and would sound good. And that delayed feedback, I think, is the problem. You don't get that instant gratification. And in a sense, you kind of have to take a stoic mindset about it, and you have to train yourself to suffer a little bit, because composing can be suffering a little when you're trying to just nug something out here, really work out ideas. So that's what I've been doing today a little bit and this morning, and yeah, so we'll see how it goes, because I plan on trying to turn this stuff into either to the symphony, or I was actually really excited to write for string quartet after the recording the other day. So I do have a question from Robert. Welcome, Robert. And his question is, in absolute music, we use different forms. For example, Sonata Form, Rondo. What are the forms used in programmatic music? Well, I think there's going to be a lot of the same crossover techniques that you'll find in programmatic music versus in absolute music. And if you're not familiar with the term, absolute music really is, the music is the driving force for everything, and it's all the musical logic that's really the driving force for when you have any kind of like change of key, change of texture, and big formal changes, things like that. Whereas programmatic music, there is something else behind it. So it could be a story, it could be a poem, I don't know, it could be anything. It could be a painting, a scene, a play, whatever. And so the things that'll dictate the changes in the formal logic change slightly. And for me, I think programmatic music actually falls much more in line with film scoring. So with film scoring, you'll hear a lot of composers say that you don't use form in film scoring because the film is the form. And in a sense, the film is like the large scale form, right? It's the exposition and the development and the recapitulation. It's taking the place of those large elements. However, the smaller scale form, the things that go into building those elements, to me is really not all that different. So if you are in a section, let's say in a film, where you want things to be fast-paced, you want it to feel like it's the intensities developing. I'm going to use the same kind of techniques there that I use developing in the development section of a sonata form. It's fragmentation of ideas. It's frequent key changes. It's sometimes contrapuntal textures or counter melodies that are going on. It's just frequent upheaval versus something where you're introducing ideas. You call it an exposition in sonata form, but the concept of a beginning. These same techniques that we use, tonic prolongation, cadencing in the same key that you start in, those kind of things actually do make sense if you want things to feel stable. Maybe you want the beginning to feel really stable, or maybe it's the ending and you want it to feel stable there. So the techniques that go into it are the same. But as far as the large scale form for kind of more traditional programmatic music, let's say a tone poem, it's a little bit fuzzier. It is kind of up to you as the composer, so you don't necessarily have to follow any kind of prescribed form. However, I think you'll find too that a lot of times there is a relatively clear logic to it that may not be, textbook sonata form, if you can even say textbook sonata form is a real thing. But you take, for instance, a tone poem like Finlandia by Sibelius, and you've got kind of a fast, slow, fast thing going on. You've got the big introduction, da 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 da. I've maybe go around and listen to it. I can't play the music right now on my computer because I don't have that capability on my laptop like I do with the big computer right now. And then in the middle, you've got the right. You've got the slow, and it's actually a lot slower than that when they play it. But you've got the slow kind of hymn section, which was used later on for the hymn. I think he was the one that actually wrote the music originally. So, but there is a clearly defined form. Now, it's not the same as sonata form. It's almost kind of like a simpler form. But that doesn't mean that you can't use those forms. It's just, I guess you'd have to figure out how to match up whatever the programming is, right? If you're doing a story or a poem or whatever, how do you match that up against these established forms? If you can't match it up, if you can't reconcile it, then maybe there's a way to modify it and to take a lot of the ideas and techniques that you would use and change it so that it does work, in that way. But, in some sense, don't overthink it. Don't overthink the form. Go with your gut feeling, especially on something like programmatic music. I look at sonata form a lot of times as not so much it's going to be the end-all, be-all of what you compose. I mean, you don't necessarily want to say, I'm composing something in sonata form, and this is me expressing myself in the deepest ways. I look at it as a vehicle for you to develop your skills and to become a better composer and to push yourself. Because, in a sense, it takes away a lot of the worry that you may have, the anxiety over how am I going to make it through a large-scale piece like this. It's like, well, actually, I've got a plan. I've got to write a theme. I've got to write a subordinate theme. I've got to have a transition. And then I've got to have a way of cutting those up and turning them into, something a little bit more tumultuous in the middle, right? It's more like large-scale thinking. So hopefully that answers your question, Robert. I mean, you don't necessarily have to, go fully one way or the other. You don't have to say, because I'm not using sonata form, I'm going to abandon all of the formal elements that are used in sonata form to do something completely original and new. I mean, doing that, I think, is going to cause so much anxiety for you as a composer, because it's like, well, now you've got this burden of not only coming up with all the notes and all the harmonic schemes and things like that, but you've got to figure out how it all connects from scratch in a logical way. And a lot of that heavy lifting has already been done by these, well-established large-scale forms. So yeah, hopefully that answers your question. I would take a look or take a listen to, good programmatic music. Obviously you got Mendelssohn's written, Midsummer Night's Dream. I think the S is on the night, not Midsummer's Night Dream. I'm not sure. You've got a bunch of tone poems from Sibelius and Strauss, and there's just lots of it out there. Obviously, you've got a lot of opera, Wagner, a lot of stuff to lean on. And if you've got specific questions about how they do it, get into the music, look at the scores, listen. And in fact, what I would recommend is just listen with like kind of an empty pad of paper, and just try to mark down. It's like, oh, at 5 minutes it feels like it changes, or at 2.5 minutes there's something that goes on there that feels like we've moved into a new section. Figure out the large scale, like what drives the piece, and then go back into the score, really take a look at, figure out, theoretically, why does this work? Okay, let's move on to another question. Let's see. This is from Clark. Have you ever find yourself writing in the same keys over and over? Yes, absolutely. C major. I got to just like expunge it from my mind. No, I mean, I think we all do that. And it's just force of habit. I mean, it's hard not to go to the easier keys. I mean, who's going to say that they don't automatically go to F or C or even G, or you get into these flat keys with all the black keys on here, like B flat. It just feels a little bit more awkward on the piano. So one of the ways I get around that, though, is by specifically choosing a new key that I haven't used in a while. So maybe I'm going to go D flat major or something like that, or maybe I'm going to go A major, or I'm going to go E flat minor or something. I don't know. And in fact, it goes into just picking restrictions for yourself in general. So if you can, sit down and figure out what it is that you need to work on specifically, and then start to set all sorts of restrictions for yourself. So say I'm going to have a piece in 12/8, and it's going to be in, why don't we say F major, or why don't we pick something a little bit more adventurous like D flat major, like I said earlier. You say 12/8, D flat major, a tempo, kind of a moderate tempo, nothing crazy, right? Something like that. And right there is a good place to start. And if you match that up also with taking something like a timer and setting it, say, I'm going to finish my theme in 30 minutes, right? And a good thing, I like using small ternary form for this because it feels really well-rounded. You get contrasting ideas in the contrasting middle section. And it's just a good vehicle for practicing this kind of exercise. And I think you'll find, too, that you're going to write some stuff that you wouldn't expect you to write, just because you're not going straight to that, C major key, right? It's just too easy to do that. So if you go here, right, even there, just playing like a D pedal, I get D, A flat, D flat here, but right there already starts to give me new ideas, right? I don't know where that's going to go. I don't know if I'm going to use it. However, I kind of liked it. And it just goes to show that picking specific things that to do different will make a difference in what you compose. So if, and those are basic restrictions. Those are the kind of meat and potatoes of what the music's going to be, the key, the time signature, things like that. But you can pick, use your imagination, come up with random stuff. You could say that every 4 bars, I'm going to change key. And then now you set your restriction, and maybe you even pick those keys. So maybe you're going to go from D flat major to A major, right? So you've got that mediant, the chromatic mediant relationship between the two. And then now we're going to change key into that. So anything like that can actually be really, really useful for you if you're going to be, if you feel like you're stuck in a rut. So if it's D major, like you say here, then just pick a new key. In a sense, it seems like it shouldn't be that simple, but it's that simple. Just sit down and say, I'm not going to compose in D minor. I'm going to compose in some other new key, and write that key down on a piece of paper. I can't stress enough how critical it is to actually write things down and not to just noodle. When you noodle, you end up sending your notes out into the ephemeral nothingness of the air, and what happens is nothing. Nothing happens. You don't compose music. You don't become a composer that way. You become a noodler. And I'm sure the history of composition is full of really amazing noodlers that never actually took the time to finish their symphony or whatever, and hence we don't know who they are. So yeah, pick a new key and write it down. Let's see. Okay, this is from Focus, Mr. Bjarke. I don't know how to say this, but sorry if it's off topic. But do you have any tips for how to be motivated to do something for a long period of time? Well, that's the struggle I think that we all face. I mean, I'm just as susceptible to procrastination and being fed up with things. In a sense, I had one teacher tell me that the secret to happiness is finishing projects, and I absolutely think he's right. This string recording that we did the other day, this thing just took forever. I don't know, between me and the director, we had other projects going on. It wasn't a huge, there was no huge rush for him, and so it kept getting pushed onto the back burner, and I would send him something, and it would take a while to get changed back, and then I would send more changes, like a week or two later. It just took forever. So now that it's finally done, I can say I'm much happier with it now that I'm not doing it anymore. Not that I didn't really enjoy the process of composing it. That being said, I think small victories, whatever small victories you can give yourself in the meantime, is critical. So if you're, like for me, I'm working on a symphony right now, and with other projects and stuff going on, the process of composing the symphony is really slow. It's just been, write a theme, come up with some ideas, maybe try to develop them a little bit, but nothing's fully structured out yet. I don't really have anything completed yet. And so I'm starting to get frustrated with myself. And in a sense, I think I need to just sit down now and really work out how does this thing come together, and what's the goal of it in a sense. So, small victories, getting yourself, to where you get feedback on what you're doing, not necessarily feedback from somebody else, but just kind of emotional feedback. Like, I wrote something, and it's more than just a sketch that ends with a bar to nothing and nowhere. You can see that right there. But that's an unfinished idea right there. And taking something to completion, I think, is one of those things that really ends up motivating you more than anything else. So, and then obviously, if you have completed projects, then getting those in front of listeners, having people listen to your music, especially if it's something you're proud of, it does motivate you when you get to hear your stuff. And I would say more than anything else, too, getting it in the hands of real players, live players if you can. So whatever you can do to get real players to play your music. Now, if it's, whatever you're writing, if you're writing EDM, it may be a bit different, but then you got to get it in front of the right audience. You got to get in front of people who are going to dance to it or whatever. So yeah, those are just kind of some basic things about, keeping up motivation. I'm not going to lie and say that it's easy. I mean, this is hard work. It's a struggle, and I go through moods where I just feel down on myself, and I feel like, man, I must be a fraud. I can't come up with any ideas, and I can't finish a piece here, and everything I write is just basic and trite and silly, But the reality is, I think we all face it, and you just have to work through it. You just have to work through those periods where you don't feel like composing, where you don't feel like your music's any good, where you don't feel like you're going to be able to make it to the end. So yeah. Hopefully that answers your question. Procrastination and motivation are big topics, and I think everybody deals with it. So, the biggest thing is just be, I guess, kind of forgiving to yourself, and let yourself, be okay with not being Superman or Superwoman composer any day of the week, and just as long as you're writing notes on paper or whatever you're using, computer, and you're making some sort of progress, that's a good thing. And actually, I've probably been spending a little bit too much time on Reddit recently, but there's a group called what's it called? I don't remember what it's called, but it's about like being motivated. And I think it's called Get Discipline or something like that. And there's a technique for continuing and developing and making sure that you're actually moving towards your goals. It's called No 0 Days. And the whole idea is that you don't want to try to load on this baggage of like, I'm going to get a million things done. You just want to not have a day where you don't do at least one thing moving towards your goal. So maybe that's where you got to start. Just move forward one little bit at a time, and you'll make it. And making it is the key to happiness. Making it to the end, not making it in the big sense like, I've made it. I don't know if we're all going to make it that way, but... Okay, so here's a question from David. Can you discuss the use of different rhythmic textures throughout the course of a piece? I noticed that Mozart in particularly changes the rhythm of harmonic accompaniment frequently. Yeah, so the texture that you're using, right? The whether it's like that, or where you've got you maybe could have contrapuntal textures. You could have homophonic textures. You could have textures that are where you're kind of chasing the melody note with the chords. Really, I think the key concept here is, one, you got to understand how that's going to affect the formal breakdown, right? So you're going to have textures that are usually a little bit more predictable. And I actually, there's an article about this in this quarter's music theory spectrum, which I started reading. I haven't finished the thing yet. And it's about Schubert's use of textures in his 3 key expositions. And at least from what I've read so far, which is not the entire article, so I can't speak super intelligently on it yet. But what they're saying is that there's kind of more standard ways of using texture, and the textures that are in main theme areas or subordinate theme areas tend to be a little bit more predictable, right? So that's where you get these. Right? Whereas if you're in kind of more transition type sections or development sections, you may get slightly more contrapuntal textures, or just something that's maybe a little bit less predictable. Maybe, right? That can be going on underneath the primary melody or something like that. So in a sense, you got to think about what's the goal of that formal area. Is it a main theme? Well, if it's the main theme, then in a sense, you want to state the harmony kind of clearly. You want to state the melodic ideas kind of clearly. And you don't really necessarily want to be clouding that with a lot of busy writing underneath. Whereas if it's a transition section, you may have already figured out, you may have already kind of laid out what are the core melodic ideas that you're going to be working with. And you've got a little bit more freedom to play around with the ideas and give the other instruments and other voices something to really grab onto. I would say, yeah, just what I like to do is, in a sense, I like to start simple with my compositions. And so let me pull this up again. This is in really basic form, and I don't know how much of this you can see off the camera, but I don't put a whole lot there. I'll right? It's relatively simple, but this could end up being something like this. Right? It could end up being a little bit more active. Or it could end up being kind of contrapuntal, Whatever. I don't know where it's going to go yet. So in a sense, you're not locked into anything at any point. I mean, unless you're done. Once you're done, you're done. But you're not really locked into any specific texture. You can always go back and change it. And as you make your way through, and this is why I like to say you got to get to know your piece when you make it to the end of your piece. Then you can really make educated decisions about whether the texture you use here was right or wrong, or does it need a little bit more development. Often that's when I find I am writing more of those contrapuntal lines, adding more shape to the other voices, and I think that's why a lot of composers really do write a lot of string quartets to push their skills and test their abilities, because you're a little bit naked when you do it. You've got 4 instruments. They've got some capabilities for writing chords, but in a sense, you've got 4 single line instruments, and you have to make it interesting, and you don't want to just make it boring for the players either. You want to make it interesting for the players as well. So I think string quartets is a great way to test out these ideas. But as usual, David, I would recommend pulling up the string quartets and trying to do an analysis of it. And as I was saying earlier, it doesn't have to be super technical analysis. Just listen to it and say, okay, here's a big texture change. Here's a big texture change. Here's a big texture change. What is it, in your best guess, that's going on here formally? Is this a transition? Is this a main theme? Is this a subordinate theme? You don't have to get deep in the weeds of, is this a normative 8-measure hybrid 2 theme or whatever. Like, you don't have to worry about that kind of stuff to really have something useful from it. Now, it's great to do that kind of analysis. You can really get deep into these things. However, just surface level stuff can be really informative as well. And sometimes that's even better for unlocking creativity, because you're not locked in so much to those minute details. So yeah, I mean, get in there. One of my favorite string quartets is the Ravel string quartet in F, because he's got so many cool, unique textures. But you can see very clearly how he's delineating the form and when the texture changes, and kind of what effect it has on the listener. And you see his kind of most kind of impressive, cool, very French-sounding textures a lot of times happen in transitory passages, so transition specifically, or within the development section. You get these cool, like, right, these cool little, like, trilly things going up and down, and guys are doing tremolos and pizzicatos and all things all at the same time. It's just really amazing writing. So I would highly recommend checking out Ravel's string quartet for that. Let's see, Dylan is asking, John, how would you know a beginning composer is ready to take on commissions with due dates, or a commission in general? Well, I guess in a sense, you don't really know until you do it. I mean, if somebody comes to you and says, I need you to write some music for me and it's going to be due in a month, I mean, if you think you can do that, then do it. I mean, I just finished remodeling our bathroom about a week ago, right? Which it took a long time, and every step of the way was something new for us. I'd never done tiling, right? I'd done drywall, but not to the extent that we did it here. I hadn't done proper framing before, and so I would procrastinate a little bit on starting, but in a sense, you just have to jump in and get your feet wet, right? So when I finally sat down and said, you know what, I'm just going to tile the shower starting today, and I calculated where I needed to start with my tile, and then I just did it. And in a sense, it was scary right when I started, because I didn't know how it was going to go. But once you get rolling, you realize that it's not an insurmountable job, and neither is composing. And in fact, deadlines are probably the best thing that can happen to you as a composer, at reasonable deadlines. I mean, obviously, if they want 2 hours of music in 4 weeks, then that's not fun. But 3 months to write maybe 10 minutes of music, absolutely doable, even for somebody. Now, you say a beginner composer. I mean, I'm assuming that you know what you're doing, at least, if you're writing for an orchestra, you know how to orchestrate, how the instruments work. You've done some composing for orchestra, and you've gotten feedback on it, and people said, yeah, this is decent, right? It may not be perfect writing, but it's good enough. And And I think if those things are in line, taking on a commission from somebody who has come to you and said, I want you to write music, that in a sense is your sign that you're ready. If nobody's come to you and said, I want to pay you to write music, then either you're not putting yourself out there at all, right? You're not getting out there and trying to get some jobs, or people have heard your music and kind of the natural way of saying we're not going to hire you is just not even contacting you at all. So in a sense, if somebody's come to you and they've listened to your music before and they're asking you to write some music and they've got a deadline, then I think you're ready. Everybody's got to start somewhere, and the first couple things that I've written as little commissions. Really, I don't even look at them as commissions, film scores. Looking back, it's like, yeah, there's lots of things I would do different now, and ways I would rewrite sections, things like that. But at the time, I was happy with it. The director was happy with it, and you just have to jump in, get your feet wet, and go for it. I don't know. Okay, so hello everybody who's joined. Hey, Ashton and David, I see you got to go to a patient, so go ahead, and thanks for listening. I'm probably going to call a little bit early tonight. If anybody has any last-minute questions, put them in right now, just because I'm on the laptop and I don't have all of my everything set up. I did repaint my red wall. So if you've seen the other symposiums, that was the red wall. Now it's just the normal white wall. I just got tired of the red. I don't know why. But with the new, well, not new, very, very old. In fact, this baby grand is about, I think it's 98 years old now. It's a Story and Clark baby grand piano that I got for free by perusing Craigslist on a regular basis, just Googling for free piano. So if you're a composer, just a real piano, it just is great, right? It just, you feel the vibration from it. You just feel kind of like when I'm on here and I'm like, writing all my stuff. I just feel like an old-timey, awesome composer. So I highly recommend getting yourself a real piano and using it to compose, because it's just more fun than, being on a keyboard. And I know you've got a million choices with every library in the world, but, why not go old school and use this sample library up here, your brain. Right. Okay, well, it looks like that's pretty much it for questions. Thanks, everybody, for joining. Oh, somebody said no sound. If there's no sound, I apologize. That means I've just been talking for 37 minutes without any sound, so I don't think that's the case. Iceman, maybe you are muted, or maybe you muted me on YouTube. So, but until next time, I will be having a symposium hopefully next Saturday morning, unless I have some issues with my setup again, or the hard drive soldering swap debacle goes poorly. So hopefully it goes well. But yeah, other than that, it should be next Saturday morning. Let me just check the calendar. Yeah, should be good for next Saturday morning. So until then, write some stuff, and that's it. Write some stuff. Write some music. Okay, that was just what I was writing earlier today. So have a good weekend, everybody. Talk to you later.